Hi, everyone. Welcome to Immigration and Asylum, Opposing Views. My name is Oliver Kymwas. I'm a fourth-year joint BA/MA student at the Committee on International Relations here at UChicago. I'm also a two-time former Pritzker Fellows Ambassador, so really love that here at the IOP. I'm excited to introduce our speakers for today's event. So today we have Governor Doug Ducey. He was governor of the state of Arizona from 2015 to 2023. He's a Republican. He's also the former CEO of Cold Stone, if anyone likes ice cream here. As governor, he faced an influx of migrants. Arizona's a border state, and he joined other governors in busing some migrants towards better prepared states. He also supported a controversial construction of a makeshift border wall in his state. He's currently a visiting fellow at the IOP, and I really encourage you all to go to his seminars. Representative Luis Gutiérrez, he represented Illinois' 4th Congressional District for 26 years. He's a Democrat and a longtime advocate for pathways to citizenship for undocumented Americans. He's also a big advocate for comprehensive immigration reform. He joined the IOP as a Pritzker Fellow last year. I have to say I went to every single one of his seminars, and they were some of the best, if not the best, events I've been to at the IOP. So that's the quality of speaking that we're getting today. Today's discussion is going to be moderated by Jonathan Weissman. Mr. Weissman is a political reporter for the New York Times. He's also an award-winning novelist. A few housekeeping reminders before we get started. Please silence your phones. See some people reaching, that's good. Silence your phones. During the event, a staff member is going to put a microphone in the audience. Please line up behind at the beginning of Q&A, line up behind the microphone. We'll give priority to student questions. Before we begin, there's a few upcoming events that I want to point you towards. First, tomorrow, the IOP 24 workshop of the quarter. It's the last IOP 24 workshop, and it is hosting IOP alum Carolyn Hutton, who's Director of Voter Protection and with the Wisconsin Democratic Party. She's going to discuss field organizing. She's going to discuss voting rights. She's going to discuss life on the campaign trail. It'll be at the IOP house at 4. I know this is 9th week, but that doesn't mean that the speaker series is done either. Next Monday, March 4th, we're hosting Vic Barrett from Our Children's Trust, Jade Begay from NDN Collective, and two-time Academy Award winner Jane Fonda at the Rubenstein Forum at 5:30 to discuss intergenerational climate activism. I hope to see all of you there. Finally, a message from UChi Votes. Early voting in 2024 for the 2024 Illinois primary will begin on campus this week, on campus during the week of spring break. Stop by the Reynolds Club on March 13th, March 14th, March 15th from 10 to 5 to cast your vote. If you won't be on campus, Election Day is March 19th. Follow UChi Votes on Instagram or go to uchivotes.com for more information. All right, now on with the event. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Weissman, Doug Ducey, and Representative Luis Gutiérrez.
So good evening, everybody. This is a hot topic. And just to think, I just came back from a week in South Carolina covering the primaries there, and I know this is an incredibly hot topic because with the economy actually growing smartly now, with inflation coming down, and even COVID in the rearview mirror, although not in our hearts, it's really immigration is the issue for Republicans. It is the thing that you hear about all the time, immigration and the border. But it's not an issue that Democrats can avoid either. And just today, President Biden announced he's going to be visiting the border in Texas after 3 years of taunting by opponents saying, why aren't you going to the border? He'll also be on the border at the same time, on the same day that Donald Trump is going to be there. Tragically last week, an undocumented immigrant from Venezuela who was apprehended at the border, then released, then arrested again in New York and released, was arrested this time for the murder of Laken Riley, a nursing student in Georgia. And I'll tell you, remember that name, Laken Riley, because that is going to be the face of the 2024 election for, at least for the Republican Party. You're never going to avoid her. And closer to home, J.B. Pritzker, Illinois' governor, just released a budget that included $181.7 million to deal with the migrant crisis and $800 million in tax increases, which tells you that this is, especially on local levels, this is a zero-sum game. Money for migrants is going to come from someone else. It's either going to come out of somebody's program, or it's going to have to come out of somebody's pocket. The Chicago mayor, Brandon Johnson, is talking about borrowing $1 billion, and some of that would also be to deal with the migrant crisis. I live in the West Loop, and there are Venezuelan migrants on many street corners asking for work, asking for help. If you drive down the median by Ashland Avenue on the median, there are migrants cutting hair, seemingly with nothing to do. They don't have work permits, and also seemingly with very little hope. It is an unavoidable issue. But at the same time, apprehensions at the border over the last month have dropped by about 50%. So we do have a question: is this really a crisis? And I'm going to put that to these two gentlemen. And I'm going to start with Arizona's governor, former governor, Doug Ducey. Governor Ducey is one of the border state Republicans who saw a massive influx of migrants and began putting them on a bus and sending them northward to cities that had promised to be sanctuaries. Representative Gutierrez, I covered actually when I was at the Washington Post as he was trying to pass comprehensive immigration reform, and every time they would get so close, and every time it would be blocked by Republicans either in the House or the Senate. So the timing of this event is perfect, and Governor Ducey, correct me if I'm wrong, but the numbers I saw were 57 busloads of migrants from the Pima border crossing sent to Washington, D.C. Maybe there were more. Maybe I'm not catching them. What was the idea behind what you and Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, and even Ron DeSantis, who doesn't even have a border with Texas, what were you trying to prove, and what do you think you accomplished?
So, Jonathan, first let me say thank you for having me here tonight. Heidi, it's great to be here at the University of Chicago. Congressman, I'm looking forward to the discussion and debate. And this is not a new topic in Arizona. We were talking about this in Arizona before it was ever a national issue. I remember when I went to run for governor, I went and met with Mitch Daniels in Indiana, Chris Christie, and Scott Walker, and they'd all say, what are the top issues in your state? And I said, they're education, the economy, and the border. And Chris Christie laughed out loud and said, well, border's not much of an issue here in New Jersey. In 2016, the border became a national issue because of what was going on. I will say under the Obama administration, we had somebody who was very serious about the border in Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, who we worked with closely on the Super Bowl and other issues. There was relative stability brought to the border under the Trump administration in the 2020 timeframe. And there's absolute chaos at the border today under the Biden administration, who reversed all of Donald Trump's executive orders on day one. So what Greg Abbott and I were trying to achieve was, and before I tell you what it was, I want you to know that I went to the White House in a private meeting with Steve Ricchetti after attending the newly sworn-in president's inauguration to say this is a mistake.
Steve Ricchetti is a deputy chief of staff at the White House.
This is a mistake about what you're doing at the border. The border has always been an issue. We're not asking for the border to be sealed. We're asking for the border to be secure. And there is relative stability at the border right now. And by reversing these executive orders and giving a signal that you're welcoming these migrants to cross the border, you will have absolute chaos. Steve Ricchetti pushed back and said that President Biden's policies were more humanitarian than President Trump's policies. I would challenge you to look at what's happening at that southern border. I don't think what you see is humanitarian. I don't think what you see in terms of the cartels taking advantage of these poor and vulnerable people in other countries to take this dangerous journey. It's a human smuggling operation by the cartels, but it's also a diversionary tactic so that they can bring fentanyl into the country. So let me finish my thought. So what we were trying to do is get some attention to what is now a national crisis in every state. Now every state is a border state.
Do you think
I think it worked. I mean, we're talking about it here at the University of Chicago, and you can see the Biden administration jumping through all kinds of hoops to address something that could have been addressed in their first year.
Representative Gutierrez, what do you think was achieved by this effort to move or spread the pain of the migrant crisis from the border?
I think it was a political stunt.
Hey,
I think
can I say something here, Jonathan?
I think
first?
it was.
I'm debating the congressman, not yourself. So it's not a stunt when a city like Douglas, Arizona, and Yuma are overrun by more migrants than they have population in the city.
Okay, but keep going.
If I could finish.
Yeah.
I think it's a political stunt. I think it's very cruel. I mean, for DeSantis to send a political operative to Texas, put together 30 Venezuelans, and take them to Martha's Vineyard, offering them jobs, housing, education for their children, when none of that was going to be there. I think that is just, look, it is what happens. The glue that keeps the Republican Party together is being anti-immigrant. It is the glue that keeps them together, and I know that from my 26 years of experience in the Congress of the United States. And yes, Governor, I worked with two of your very good friends on immigration reform. John McCain and I, along with Senator Kennedy and Jeff Flake, another very good friend of yours, we introduced comprehensive immigration reform in 2004. But if I could, because the governor said that Biden repealed all of Trump's executive orders. So reverse them. Okay, reverse them. This is the Cato Institute, just last week. 120 different measures that Biden has taken since becoming president to control immigration at the border and to close the border down. This is 120 different. And I just want to say very quickly,
they're not working.
If I could,
I mean, they're not working.
Wait. Actually,
if I could just, I think, I know that's what you want people to believe.
I've got to address some other things, if I can, Congressman.
Well, wait, hold on.
I'm just trying to get a word in edgewise. At least in the House, there's time, right? Okay, the gentleman from Illinois has 2 minutes.
Well, I started this.
Hold on, I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. Luis, what is more cruel or inhumane about having Chicago take care of migrants than Phoenix or Yuma?
The shipping of them, as though they were human that is cruel and inhumane. It's promising them something that isn't there. Why not ask them? When my dad came to Chicago, when he migrated to Chicago, where'd he come? He came to live with his sister. That's what most immigrants do. They come and they live with family members. You could organize this. I'm sure there are many Venezuelans that have family members and that we could do this. Look, Governor, I want order at the border too. I think we should have a secure border. I think it is something that is very, very necessary. But at the same time, I have the Cato Institute, not exactly liberal. I mean, they want to privatize the post office, eliminate Obamacare, privatize Social Security. 120 different measures
that aren't
they
working.
Say. No, 120 different. Many of them are
not
like
working.
Title 42, right? Which is Trump's using the pandemic law to stop anybody from being able to cross. Biden let it elapse in 2023, and then he imposed Title VIII, which has deported more people than Donald Trump did using Title VIII of the immigration reform. And I'm sorry to everybody, but it's I don't want to get into the weeds on these things, but everybody does remember when he said there's a pandemic and we need to shut the border down. So he used this obscure Title 42 in the code and he shut it down. Biden let it elapse in 2023.
But Title 42 was a thing, and I mean, and the Remain in Mexico. And I'll ask you, what Remain in Mexico, in which migrants who hope to get asylum in the United States had to wait until they were adjudicated to cross the border. Do you believe that those migrants, was the border really under control, or was it just out of sight? It was on the other side of the border, but those migrants were still being preyed upon. They were living in tent cities. Was that really more humane? I'm ready.
Mm-hmm. First, I want to say, I think that if you're going to say that the glue that holds the Republican Party together is to be anti-immigrant, you haven't been paying much attention to demographic shifts in the Republican Party, to Juan Ciscomani from my team, born in Mexico, elected as a freshman in Congress, to all kinds of different factors.
Yeah, there are Latino Republicans.
Okay, this is not...
And the glue that keeps them together in the Republican Party is being anti-immigrant.
No.
They're not mutually exclusive. It's not like all Latinos are pro-immigrant.
We would like to have legal immigration.
Of course we want legal immigration.
What I would say about the Trump policies and the policies that if you would go to Republican governors challenge President Biden with 10 reforms, those were the Trump policies that we asked. There were a number of things that the Trump-Pence administration did. One was to threaten to close the border. And that got Mexico's attention. Because much of it is what happens on our southern border, Jonathan, but also what happens on Mexico's southern border. If you recall, in the first Democratic debate for president, I believe the first question to everyone on that stage was, will you provide free health care to illegal immigrants? By a show of hands. Everybody, including Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, raised their hand yes. Well, that videotape is used all over South and Central America to encourage people to go on this dangerous journey. So yes, we need immigration reform, but that's what happens in Washington, D.C. We can do this by beginning with border security. To me, that is step one. And also, Luis, when you talk about...
I introduced comprehensive immigration reform. I introduced comprehensive immigration reform.
No, it's not going to happen.
No,
it's not going to happen.
With your friends.
Wait.
It's not going to happen.
If I could,
can I want to just say...
Hold on.
It's in the record. It's Flake, Gutierrez, McCain, Kennedy. No.
It didn't happen.
800 pages. The first 500 pages, border enforcement.
Okay.
Yes.
Why did it fail?
Right.
Because Republicans refused to sit down at the table and allow 10, 11 million undocumented people to be able to be free.
Let's talk
in America.
Let's talk. Wait a minute. Let's talk about this. Right?
I want to talk about the transportation.
No. I'm not letting you talk about that right now. I wanted to because Representative Gutierrez brought up comprehensive immigration reform, and I want to ask him where the things have changed. Look, there was an implicit or an explicit deal when you were writing these bills, which was the Democrats would accept a clampdown on the border security, new rules on asylum, in exchange for the legalization and eventual pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, especially for dreamers. That was part of the deal. Now, your own party in the Senate just struck a deal that cast aside that give and take, and just said, okay, we're ready to accept border security only, no path to legalization, no path to citizenship. What does that say about where the immigration issue is now and where your party is right now about
I think the Democratic Party has failed miserably the immigrant community of the United States of America. Yes, Democrats have stood up for immigrants, but at the same time, we have acted cowardly in many, many occasions and courageously in others. But I just want to say, Governor, we take our party on when we believe our party is wrong. Your party simply acquiesces to Donald Trump when he says something. And let me just say, it's personal for you. You're from Arizona, you're at the border.
Well, it's also personal for him because he did not he did stand up to Donald Trump.
We got to get this guy the tape.
But let me just, if I could just, it's also personal to me. I have two wonderful son-in-laws.
Can we talk policy?
From Guerrero.
No,
Let me finish. From Guerrero, Mexico, right? When Donald Trump, and I'm going to talk policy, when Donald Trump begins his campaign for president of the United States and says Mexicans are murderers, rapists, and drug dealers, they're bad people. When he starts with that, and then a man in Texas drives 7 hours across Texas to murder 23 Mexicans, because that's what he did in El Paso, Texas. Policy and words matter. And those are not the policy and the words that have always represented the Republican Party. And I will share some more of that later on today.
Well, I don't know how much that's going to do to solve the immigration or border security issue, but you can keep going down that path if you would like. I'm not here to defend what is happening in Washington, D.C. I think there is plenty of blame to go around on both sides. You're talking about a deal that was negotiated before I ever entered public life. I'm talking about what you deal with as the governor of Arizona, and I will tell you the debate has changed. Under President Barack Obama, Jerry Brown deployed the National Guard to the border, along with New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. Under Donald Trump, Jerry Brown deployed the National Guard to the border. Now, under President Biden, Greg Abbott and I had to found the American Governor's Border Strike Force to get people to send National Guard and law enforcement because there was a dereliction of duty. The border was wide open and unprotected. This is not only a national defense issue, it's a public safety issue. And during COVID, it was a public health issue. There is much that can be done from a policy perspective to mitigate this issue. And if you do get a secure and stable border, I can tell you there are a lot of Republicans and small business owners that want to see immigration reform. I think the country has a big, open, and welcoming heart when they think there is stability at the border. And today, I believe there's a crisis.
Look,
if you haven't been to the border, you should go. And I'm so glad that President Biden, after 50 years in public life, now chooses to see it.
I have been to the border.
I know you're approaching this as a governor, but I do want to ask you, that deal that was struck in the Senate, would you have accepted that deal?
The deal, what Jay Johnson told me, and he said this on public television many times, the first number he would look at when he came into work in the morning was the number of crossings. If it was over 1,000, the border was in crisis. The Senate deal was at 5,000 every day. I think that's a non-starter.
It was
5,000.
Yeah, but Republicans have made it sound like you had once there were it was 5,000 contacts, 5,000 apprehensions. Right now, that's virtually every day. I mean, that would have shut down the border under that deal, right? I mean, that is
well,
the
not
number
the way
of
I don't read 5,000 crossings as a border that's shut down, a border that's stable.
No, that was the trigger to shut it down.
I do believe in our process and our system. So if the Republicans and the Democrats negotiated a bill in the Senate, which they obviously did not because it didn't go to the House, if everyone accepts that and it goes to the president and it's signed, then we'll have a change in policy. But that's on Washington.
We're never going to have a change in policy.
Wait a minute. Why didn't
Donald Trump will never allow an immigration reform bill?
This was not an immigration reform bill.
What he did with the Senate is he spoke and he said, no, don't give that to the Democrats. Say no to that bill. We cannot give this up as an issue. And that's exactly what happened. And what did Johnson do in the House of Representatives? He's still Speaker, I think. We don't know. They keep changing them. So what did he say? He said, President Trump said, no. This is a man that 6 years ago said he detested Donald Trump. Now he went and kissed the ring of Donald Trump. The important thing is, you're right. Even when Democrats turn their back on their principles and make it harder for asylum seekers to achieve asylum, even when they say we will give you $20 billion more so that you can have more Border Patrol agents and do more at the border and get nothing back for the incomprehensive immigration reform, you're right, things have changed, but they still say no. Because the glue that keeps the Republican Party together is being anti-immigrant.
I reject.
Governor Ducey, I'm not taking sides here. It is what Representative Gutierrez said is factually true. Donald Trump actually said it out loud. Do not pass this bill. Do not give Joe Biden this win. I don't want that. And that is when, I mean, even some of the people who co-authored that deal stepped aside. So what does that say about the seriousness of the Republican Party about fixing the problem?
Jonathan, I am not here to defend Congress. All right, so you're going to have to find somebody else that does that. I'm telling you about the ideas and the solutions that I've seen bring stability to the border, what can come again and what might be good immigration process. The bill that you are talking about was never voted on in the Senate and never put to the House. I mean, this is on Senate leadership and this is on House leadership to advance those bills.
In this case, it is on the de facto nominee of the Republican Party for president.
Do you know the first bill I passed as governor? It was the American Civics Act. It's so that every kid in Arizona has to pass the same citizenship test that a newly naturalized American has. And what's in there is that there are 3 separate and co-equal branches. All right? So this is on Congress. And Congress has failed, and they've been failing for 20 plus years.
So are you saying that Donald Trump has no influence on the Republican Party in Congress?
No, I did not say that. I said Congress has failed here. They were failing before you ever heard of Donald Trump as a public candidate.
It is the glue that keeps the Republican Party together, being anti-immigrant.
That's a trope.
And you can talk about the border, and just act as though there aren't 11, 12 million undocumented workers in this country.
Well, I'm not acting like that.
Let me finish. Most of them have been here over 30 years, right?
So
they bought the house, they paid off the mortgage, they sent their kids to college, and there's nothing for them. And they are working hard, paying taxes. And it's time that America follow its heart. Because if you did a poll right now, most Americans would say it is time to have comprehensive immigration reform and give a pathway to legalization to the 10, 11 million. You don't want to talk about them? I do want to talk about them because we came here to talk about immigration. And immigration, yes, border security is important. And that's why, Governor, I suggest to you that I sat down with Republicans, with McCain and Flake. We introduced it, 800 pages. The first 500 pages was all, if we had approved it, and if Republicans had not stood in the way, you would have a secure border today. But you refuse to do comprehensive immigration.
Governor, I would like to ask you that. I mean, it is true that Jeff Flake, then a congressman from Arizona, and John McCain, then a senator from Arizona, both Republicans, were the face of compromise on immigration. Where do you think the party in your state and the country has gone since then?
So first, I want to say, and you keep invoking Senator McCain. Senator McCain's story to me, along with John Kyle and Jeff Flake, is another story as to why this failed. But regardless, that bill failed and comprehensive immigration reform failed. Now you're painting the picture of the hardworking individual that comes to this country. There is an alternative. You You said it in your introduction. I'm talking about the fentanyl deaths and the drug trade and the cartels. This is also part of what's happening at the border.
This is why, and I can't finish a sentence with this guy. A border that is orderly. We want an orderly border. You cannot find a bill that I sponsored that didn't have border security as a premise
Governor Ducey,
of comprehensive immigration reform.
This has been a complete failure from Washington, D.C. Thank you for your effort. It hasn't worked. What I'm talking about is a staged program that's targeted and I believe would work, and it begins with border security. It would be immigration reform that follows, that's both needs-based, merit-based, and values-based, that would address asylum. And then I would also talk about our trade relationship with Mexico. My first trip as an Arizona governor was to Mexico City. My first trip upon re-election was to Mexico City. My last international trip as governor was to Mexico City. It's Arizona's largest trading partner ×4. We were incredibly tough on the border while having a very good trade relationship with Mexico. We're lucky to have Mexico as our neighbor to the south and Canada
They're
to
our
the
number
north.
one trading partner in the world. And 7 million Americans wake up every day and go to work because they buy goods made in America.
So my
yes, we should have a different relationship.
My point is that
and you shouldn't be president of the United States and say Mexicans are murderers, rapists, drug dealers. And I'm
not going to go on all the things.
I'm going to get back to policy here. Do you think, and I'm going to ask both of you this, do you think that if Republicans got their priority, which is border security, asylum reform, then they would allow the conversation to move to legalization, to new work work visas, to then open the border?
So, one, we were not going to open the border.
Well,
we're going to have a secure
I'm
border.
sorry, open the
Step
immigration.
one is securing the border, to have stability at the border. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's not 5,000 crossings a day, and it is having that security there. Two is enforcement of the laws that already exist. But to simplify the answer, if we were able to do that, I believe that we would have a larger discussion around immigration reform, and like I said, needs-based, merits-based, and values-based. Now, that would be a debate and a discussion. But I think the growth in the country, the dynamism of the economy would require that. But step one is border security. And just like you have obviously tried, and others that came before you, that has not happened, I believe, because it was comprehensive. So I know that this involves some trust.
The governor is exactly correct.
How so?
On this we agree. Republicans only want enforcement, enforcement, and enforcement. They do not want freedom and acceptance of the fact that there are millions upon millions of immigrants in this country that have spent decades in this country working, paying taxes, and to let them see
I don't think that's what I said.
come out.
But
I don't think that's what you said either. But I will say
that's what I understood, Governor.
But Representative Gutierrez, do you worked with Republicans? Mm-hmm. Do you believe that if Republicans got what they wanted with border security, the conversation would then move toward legalization and legal?
You have to do them together. That's why it has to be comprehensive immigration reform. We need a system that secures our border and makes sure that that border is safe and secure. But we also need a humane immigration policy that takes care of a few things. Our economy, which immigrants help grow our economy, our security at the border, but also that when someone is seeking asylum, and they are in fear of losing their life, that there be a quick, effective way of determining whether or not they're going to be admitted into the United States. We would have done all of these things. But for Republicans always have said to me, just do the enforcement, Luis. Just do the enforcement, and then we'll talk about the other stuff. No, we'll never talk about the other stuff.
Let's talk.
It's compromise.
Governor Ducey, you're a great advocate of free enterprise, and I want to talk about. I remember being on a campaign swing with former Vice President Mike Pence in Iowa, and we were in a smallish town in central Iowa, and he was basically giving the usual spiel about the border being in crisis and President Biden being a disaster and and he was talking to business leaders in this town, and one by one, each of these business leaders stood up and said, "I don't have any workers.
Yep.
I need workers. I see what you're saying, but actually, I have a group of Nicaraguans." One guy was saying, "I have a group of Nicaraguans. They're undocumented, but they're such good workers. I need them." I mean, how do you balance your desire for what you're calling stability at the border for a clear need for immigration for our economy and our workforce?
So I think what you're describing, Jonathan, demonstrates what a failure of policy this has become. We have made the incentives easier to come here illegally than to come here legally, and it's not working. So I do think if you start with enforcement, there is an appetite for people that Mike Pence would go see, and any good conservative on the campaign trail, for this immigration reform. But I do believe, politics is the art of the possible. What Congressman Luis is promoting has proven to be impossible. What I am putting out there with border security first and immigration reform second, well, let's see if that's possible. And I will not be leaving the conversation once we secure the border. I will be the advocate for needs-based, merit-based, and value-based, including asylum. But it requires some trust
Governor,
here, Congressman.
You're right. And I heard that argument before. And women heard that argument for hundreds of years. Just compromise. We'll let you vote one day. They stood up and they demanded change and they demanded equality. And it is time that we have comprehensive immigration reform that allows all of the things you want to do, Governor. I'm with you. I agree with you. They are all in the proposals that we have made. But I think words matter. We want to talk only about policy. I'll talk a little bit. Can I just give me a moment? I'll talk a little bit about policy. We lead the world because, unique among nations, we draw our strength from every country of the world. If ever we close the door to new Americans, our leadership in the world would soon be lost. Thanks to each wave of new arrivals to the land of opportunity, we are a nation forever young. America draws the people of the world. No country on earth comes close. This, I believe, is one of the greatest sources of America's greatness. Ronald Reagan, leaving office, said, "I need to leave this message." And this is part of his final speech. And now we have a candidate, your presumptive nominee, talking about how immigrants from around the world are going to poison the blood of America. And then he says, well, I just don't read Hitler in Mein Kampf. Really?
That was a great speech, and I think Reagan placed it in the penultimate days of his presidency for a reason. And but it was also a different time.
He saw what was coming.
No one sees what's coming. You deal with it in real time.
I think people can
that's
see
a
what's
wonderful
coming.
speech, and let's secure the border and then reform immigration.
Okay.
But Jonathan,
No.
I think words matter. This is where the Republican Party was in 2008. Today, it's talking about poisoning the blood of America and using fascist statements from Mein Kampf written by Hitler to run for president of the United States. Do you denounce Donald Trump and using that statement?
I'm here to talk border security and immigration.
Of course.
And I
That
do
is
think that the
immigration.
policies
That is
of the previous
immigration.
administration did much to bring stability to the border, and I think we'd be talking about immigration reform right now had the Biden administration maintained it.
If you want to stop illegal immigration, you need to have pathways to legal immigration.
You need to
what
secure the
Donald
border.
Trump did
Guys,
was reduce legal immigration.
We're about to go to audience Q&A, but I do want to ask, I want to talk about the wall for 1 second.
Yeah.
I remember I was on another campaign swing with Asa Hutchinson, and somebody asked him about finishing the wall. And Asa Hutchinson, a Republican who at one point was making immigration policy at the Department of Homeland Security, talked about going to the border wall, the part that was built, and seeing different colored chalk. One chalk represented the hole in the wall that had been knocked by the cartels and the coyotes by Sentinel torches. The other one was, the other call was parts of the wall that had been repaired. Is this really what we're going to do? We're going to have the Border Patrol repair wall now?
Well, I think if you listen to the folks on the Border Patrol, the people that do this every day, they'll tell you that physical barriers or walls in certain areas make a big difference, especially on mass illegal migrations that will be stewarded by the cartels as a diversionary tactic to bring fentanyl or other drugs. We only have so many boots on the ground. So I think it's both the wall and the satellite and the infrared and folks on the ground and a strong policy that's well communicated that would make the real difference here. But I do think, what we saw in Arizona is these physical barriers in the areas where necessary can make a real difference, especially to stop the cartels who are real actors in this discussion. They're very powerful. These are some of the worst people in the world. They're affecting young people, high school and college kids in our community. And I think as Americans, we should find it unacceptable. And beginning to stop this begins with border security.
I could not agree with you more on the different elements of border security. They have been in every bill that has been introduced. But at the same time, Governor, the art of success is to compromise, is to say, this are your values, your priorities. These are your values, these are your priorities. Let's get it done. Why can't we do both? Because every time I walk into a supermarket, you know what I say? Thank God for those farm workers that are out there in America. And yes, most of them are not American citizens. And most of them are undocumented.
Luis, I live in Arizona.
But they are there. No, but let me finish. But they are there for us. And you know what? It's about time to give those farm workers. I understand that. I'm going to finish, Jonathan. It's about time that we give those farm workers who feed us their liberty and their freedom and their acceptance of equality in this country.
And before we move to Q&A, I just want to say that when Democrats had the majority in the House and the Senate and the White House, they failed to pass comprehensive immigration reform. And when Republicans had the majority in the House and the White House and the Senate, they didn't even try. So, I have to say, there was not a single border security bill in the first 2 years of the Trump administration. So I will say that both parties have failed on that front. All right, now we are going to go to Q&A. I'm going to start on this side, and then we'll just go back and forth. Or do you want to handle it? Okay, Joel, you take it away.
Hello, my name's Ruby Velez. I grew up an hour and a half north of the border in Tucson, Arizona. I'm the daughter of a Mexican undocumented immigrant, and I've worked in humanitarian aid groups from No Mas Muertes to the African Advocacy Network since I was around 15. And so I'm quite familiar with the asylum process. I have a question for Mr. Ducey. So I understand that, border security is it is undoubtedly necessary in this country. Border Patrol are on the front lines of, saving people who are in the desert in need of resources and support. But I believe it's concerning when we lose the human element in discussions that become politicized. You granted Border Patrol and ICE, I believe, $335 million in 2018, seeing the impending crisis at the border. But what concerns me is that there are no strings attached to that money. There have been documents of excessive use of force for years. The prevention through deterrence model, which we've adopted in border security since 1994, has been proven to be have a normalization of xenophobia. There are reports of that from the University of Arizona to Georgetown. And what concerns me is that we're seeing that money go in a kind of blanket front to these organizations without any accountability, without any objective oversight agencies. And meanwhile, we're seeing groups like Casas Elitas, who's on the ground in Tucson doing most of the work, providing shelter, providing case management, providing food to undocumented immigrants who are released onto the streets. They're out of money, and Border Patrol is offering bonuses to new hires. So I would ask you, what do you see the future of effective border security if we're seeing what's working in Arizona is not working right now?
Well, I think in terms of your question, we did provide additional dollars to the men and women who are on federal law enforcement, along with deploying the National Guard, both under Barack Obama and Donald Trump, along with governors like Jerry Brown. These are good men and women that are put in a terrible position in a very difficult job, and I think it's unbelievable that states like Arizona and Texas have to shore up the difference in how to make this happen. So I have been pointing the finger at Washington, D.C. Jonathan pointed out that there's enough blame to go around here, but I think that these people do need funding, and we need more of them. I mean, the border in Arizona is nearly 300 miles long. It's wide open and unprotected in many areas, and the Texas border is dramatically longer. In New Mexico and California, under this administration, aren't even paying attention. So when we have had it shored up, or the Guard there, or additional resources, the cartels just flex and adapt to other states or places where there isn't that enforcement. I bring it back to what has happened around the deaths, the fentanyl, and the cartels. I would think on this alone we would be able to find agreement. And I know that the congressman wants to talk about a comprehensive plan. Jonathan has pointed out how both parties have failed here, but this hasn't worked. And so my plea is that what is possible is enforcement at the border and to secure that border. And I will be as passionate an advocate of immigration reform beyond that once we demonstrate some trust with the American people that this can actually be accomplished. There's no appetite for this today, Luis, with complete chaos at the border. It is a political football for both parties in D.C.
Okay, Representative Gutierrez, quickly respond, and then we're going to move into the...
So first of all, most of the fentanyl that is stopped at the border is stopped at ports of entry using electronic surveillance.
Because the other fentanyl gets through. So the one you interdict is at the ports of entry. The other ones are porous.
And it also comes through other ways. But look, we're stopping it there.
Should we argue on this point?
No. We should. You want to know about fentanyl. I want to stop it. And we know the majority of fentanyl is coming through legal points of entry. And you know who's getting arrested? The majority are American citizens bringing that fentanyl into the United States of America. That's fact. I want to stop. You want to secure the border? If you want to secure the border and you want to stop illegal immigration, you need to have legal pathways of immigration to this, the greatest nation on earth.
We do have.
And with this, I will finish.
No.
With this, I will finish.
No, Representative Gutierrez.
No.
We need to get more questions.
I just need to finish this thought. Here's what Biden did. He said to Nicaraguans, to Venezuelans, to Cubans, and to Haitians, I'm going to use humanitarian parole. 40,000 visas. You got to be sponsored. 90% shut down in illegals trying to cross the border from those 4 countries. It works. Legal pathways work, and they are also humane.
Okay. Very interesting point. I mean, it's an excellent point. You guys are really identifying just how broad the issue of immigration and border security is. But Don't respond now. Yes.
Hello, I'm Thomas. I'm a fourth year at the university. It would seem uncontroversially good to have more highly talented people in the U.S. Regardless of the security of the border, why not now make it easier for highly talented people to legally immigrate to the U.S.? Thank you.
So this is, the issue of H-1B visas, H-2B visas, all these things. It's an issue that we have not discussed. So, what do you guys think? This was another. Actually, I must say, this is another kind of bargaining chip in Congress where Republicans want more of these visas. Republicans have traditionally wanted more of these visas because they're for higher income workers, more educated workers who are going to pay taxes, whatever. And Democrats have not wanted to give them that without something else for workers that maybe who have been in this country for years. Is it time to stop always having negotiations like this, bargaining chips? Is it time to maybe expand the visa programs?
I think we can expand the visa program. I don't think that's going to do much for anything at the border, but I think it's going to strengthen the American economy.
Governor Ducey, what do you think?
Country.
Do you favor an expansion of the legal visa programs like this?
I'm all for this after we secure the border. Thomas and I talked about this. I'm going to stick on it. It's something that can be done. I've seen it done. The congressman is telling me about all these things that Joe Biden has said that no one has heard, but the entire Southern world saw free health care, and the drug cartels all have it on video on their phones. We need to secure the border.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Don. I have two questions for Congressman Gutierrez. The first question is, if the Democrats were really serious about securing the border, why do they have to include billions of aids to Ukraine and Israel as part of the border security bill? The second question is, as an international student, I've lived in this country for 10 years, and I almost got denied of my visa for hanging out in the country for too long. Why shouldn't I fly to Tijuana and cross the border and take my 50-50 chance in gaining asylum and access to employment?
Well, let me just say this. I want you to stay in America. If you've been educated in this country and you're talented, as you clearly are, I want that talent to remain in the United States of America. And within comprehensive immigration reform, those things happen. And let me just say that it's not a zero-sum game. They should never, first of all, have mixed aid to the Ukraine, which I believe we should be doing now at this moment, helping the Ukrainians fight Putin and his fascist dictatorship. I think we should be doing that. We shouldn't have mixed it. We should have just passed it. We should have sent them the armaments and everything they need, and we should be supporting NATO, number one. Number two, it's not a zero-sum game, right? Immigrants come to America. The Congressional Budget Office just released their 10-year forecast, economic forecast, 2 weeks ago. Here's what they said, Governor. $7 trillion increase to the GDP of the United States of America in the next 10 years. There'll be $7 trillion. $1 trillion more monies to the federal treasury, mostly because of immigrants. Yes, the new immigrants that are coming. And don't take this Congressional Budget Office, it's a nonpartisan office used by the Congress.
This kid was asking about Ukraine.
If I could,
I don't know where
well, he did answer that. He did answer that.
I mean, this is great. This is great.
You know what?
Congressional
I am
stuff.
trying.
Well, wait,
Don't start the congressional stuff. You know, you're an invited guest to the city of Chicago, and you know we welcome you here. We may not agree with you in the city of Chicago, but we welcome you here. And we could just be polite, just for a moment. I just want to make clear one thing. Don't take my word for it. The chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, nominated and put in place by Donald Trump, said that immigrants are a net plus to the economy of the United States of America. And if we would have legal immigration, we could spur even a greater economic renaissance in the United States.
Nobody is making a case against that, Luis. The question was,
Yes, you are. You're
why
saying
did
secure the border,
Congress
we're not gonna
put Ukraine
do anything
funding
else?
in a bill that had already been too much to pass the Senate and the House? That was the question.
Yeah, but,
All right,
they
okay.
did separate them.
Next question.
They did separate them.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Desmond Saunders. I'm a first year at the college, and I just want to. We talked a bit about relations with Mexico, but I was just wondering what your thoughts were on how the U.S. should be handling relations with the countries where the majority of immigrants are actually coming from. Like, should we be rethinking sanctions policy on Venezuela and questions like that? And I understand that's maybe more of a long-term way of trying to approach immigration, but do you think that that can ultimately be more important than the sort of the short-term things that we've been talking about here?
That's an excellent question. The question is, can you get to the root problem, which is the flow of migrants from these countries where chaos is reigning?
I heard the question, and I think the root cause of the problem is in the Oval Office on what's happening at the border, but I do think you bring up a good point, and it was Milton Friedman of the University of Chicago who said, when the crisis comes, people will look for the ideas that are lying around. And I think the crisis is not only what happened at the border, but also COVID-19, our supply chain, and our reliance on China. And I believe this should be a wake-up call for whatever you want to call it, a new Monroe Doctrine, of us to find a way with our neighbors and friends like Mexico, Central America, and South America to shift more of this trade relationship to help their economies become healthier. One thing I always talked about when I was asked why I was spending so much time with Claudia Pavlovich, the first female governor of the state of Sonora, I said, this is our largest trading partner. And when Mexico has prosperity, we have peace at the border and people have better options. We all saw what happened with COVID-19, China, and the supply chain. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here to fix the focus on how we do this from economic trade and development. And I think that's wide open.
You want to take a crack at this?
Look, the sanctions and the strangling of the Venezuelan economy has consequences. And if you are on the one hand saying you're going to fight Marxism and communism, don't be surprised when hundreds of thousands of people knock on your door saying, here we are, as Venezuelans have come fleeing. 7 million Venezuelans. But here's what has worked. You know why fewer Venezuelans are being detained at the border? Because the president used legal pathway for Venezuelans to come. And moreover, they don't cost anything. Why? Because they can never be a burden. Why can't they be? Because they must be sponsored by an American citizen, and that American citizen must have the resources to make sure they're never a burden, or they pay the consequences of any debts that arise from their presence in the United States. So I think our consequences, yes, there are consequences. There are consequences. There are reasons why people come to America, and sometimes we are the cause of those reasons.
All right.
Sometimes the president invites them.
But all right. We could do an entire debate just on climate change and immigration if we wanted to, but we have to move on. Okay.
Hi, I'm Neha Modak. I'm a second year in the college. Governor Ducey, you spoke highly of your work with Governor Abbott, so I would like to ask about the passage of Texas Senate Bill 4, which criminalizes undocumented immigration in the state of Texas, and many experts say will increase racial profiling and harm immigrant families. So I would like to ask how you justify these conservative laws that, in the name of border security, potentially harm immigrant families that have been here for generations.
I think you see a good governor doing everything in his power to address an issue that the federal government is absent without leave. You've seen Secretary Mayorkas. He hasn't paid attention to the border at all. Kamala Harris was named the border czar. I don't think there's been anyone more unserious about the border in the last decade than Kamala Harris. I don't think she's ever been to the border until she was named that position. So you see Greg Abbott doing everything he possibly can. And what this really is asking the federal government to do their job and to do their role in this, and they're not.
Well, first of all, let me just correct one thing. Vice President Harris has been to the border. When she was a U.S. Senator from the state of California, I was with her in San Diego, and we went to the border. So she has been to the border. California also has part of the border.
And you have a wall in California.
I have a wall in California. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Distracted me from where I was thinking. I was going to talk about Harris. And you know what? I was pretty disillusioned because you say that Biden wants an open border. Yet when Vice President Harris went to Central America, what were her parting words to Central Americans and to Latinos and Latino? Don't come. Don't come. Does that sound like an open borders kind of vice president of the United States? Those are the facts. The fact is that there isn't an open border policy at the border between the United States. We could do many more things to secure that border. But the fact is technology exists, and the fentanyl and the drugs that are killing hundreds of thousands of Americans, they're coming through secure ports of entry. Let's put the money there and the resources there as we redouble our efforts with the Border Patrol. But Governor, you have to understand, the way you stop illegal immigration is by having pathways of legal immigration to the United States.
I do understand this, and I have been to the border, and I want you to know, first, the congressman is asking you not to believe your lying eyes on what is happening at the border in terms of the amount of migration that is there. And he's also saying that the majority of our interdiction on fentanyl happens at the ports of entry. If you were to go to Rocky Point from Arizona, you go through Lukeville or other places. And yes, there's interdiction there, but there are also people streaming across the border who are never caught. Who are never
that they're
caught.
not streaming. I'm simply saying
we're talking about millions of people now.
We're talking about somebody with a backpack and somebody with a truck. Let's stop.
You can bring in a lot of fentanyl with a backpack.
You and I can agree we should stop the trucks that are coming across.
I'd like to stop as much of it as we can.
Yes,
okay.
we can,
right.
and you and I agree that we should stop that.
Okay, next question.
Hi, thank you so much for agreeing to speak here today. I am a third-year student at the college, and I am training to be a lawyer that hopefully one day works in criminal defense and immigration. Here's my question, and I would like to open it up to both of you, especially the governor, because this is a question that congressmen have kind of talked about, and I would like to sort of like press an answer from you, if that's okay. I wanted to ask if we all agree that immigration is a pivotal force in this workforce and contributes positively to the economy of the United States of America. Why can't, like what Congressman has proposed, right, to simultaneously enforce a secure border and also the legalization process, because we're not actually changing anything that is propelling people to leave their home country and to come to the United States. There is barely anything that the United States can do about that. So you're not changing the fact that people are coming. So if you are increasing enforcement at the border without providing people a path of legalization, you're just increasing more conflict and, pain that is happening at the border right now. So why can there not be a simultaneous reform of both enforcement, securing the border, and also providing people with a legalization pathway? Why does it have to be, as you were suggesting, enforcement first and legalization comes second? What is there to preventing simultaneous processing?
I think it's a very fair question. I'm only using the evidence of what I've observed in Washington, D.C. for the last 3 decades. This has not worked. It hasn't happened, whether under a Republican president, Democrat president, full majorities, or divided government. So I'm offering something that I believe can work and would accomplish what we want in terms of what the intention is of these bills, but they're not passing the United States Congress. They're not getting out of the House or the Senate. So what I'm putting is a two-step process, a three-step process at the most that would put this issue behind us. And I will tell you, as the former governor of Arizona, I would love to put this issue behind us. I'd love to argue about all kinds of other things except this issue, which has been consistent and persistent for now 20-plus years.
Sorry,
And again,
like what
we
would
need
you
a-
like to see so that you might agree to a simultaneous processing? Like what is there, clearly there's something that you're not happy with at the moment, but is there anything that you might see that might make you change your mind, that might be open to, processing them at the same time? Is there anything?
Well, the devil is always in the details on these issues. That's why I've tried to communicate as clearly as I can on what comes first. On the Senate bill, which I don't think was ever voted on,
Yes.
the thing that I was surprised about was the number 5,000. But again, I understand it's a negotiation, and for you to ask, Jonathan, is this the right thing to do to negotiate? I mean, that's what congressmen and senators do. I didn't have to do that as much as a governor on legislation, because you can threaten with veto or cajole on a bill that you will sign. So I do think we've seen a lack of leadership on this, and it was good for you to point out that in the first 2 years that this didn't happen in 2016. But what I'm putting forward is very solvable. And then I do think this would not be only Democrats that would be beating the drums of fixing immigration. And the other thing is we do have an immigration system right now. Yeah. I would say it's broken and not working. It is broken. But we do have a system.
We agree.
There. We do not have security at the border.
I couldn't agree. I don't disagree with you. But I've been invited to that dance before. The first step, second step, third step that you're talking about. Guess what? It ends in enforcement, and never allowing 10, 11, 12 million people to come out of the shadows. They have millions of American citizen children. They've been contributing. You know what? I'm more for security than you are in that sense. I want the 11, 12 million to come, give their fingerprints to the FBI, go through an exhaustive background check, and if they pass, we give them a permit to work in America. All right. And if after 10 years, they are fluent in English and can pass the civics test that you were so proud of promoting in your state, then I say we give them a green card. And maybe 5 years later, and this was in our bill, 15-year trek before they could become a citizen of the United States. But guess what? We know they're on the books, we know they're paying taxes, and we know who they are and where they are.
Next question.
Continue the theme of the last question and the governor's law for civics education. I wonder if the immigration issue would be less contentious if there were adequate institutions to assimilate people to American life by having literacy, high-quality early child care, and education in civics and history, read history. So this is something that would require resources, but it would enhance the capabilities of people, and these programs really should be available for natural-born Americans, where there's a rather pathetic level of literacy in a lot of places. So I wonder if there's a vision of improving these institutions for assimilation, which really means improving education. And it could be both public and private, not just like a public education system, but as Cato would do it through scholarships or vouchers. But then in exchange for all of this, that there would be controlling the number of people who flow into it so it's not just overwhelmed.
Arizona has been very innovative on educational reform and education freedom. We were the first state in the nation to pass the universal ESA law. So every family in Arizona has access to their taxpayer dollars to send their children to the school of their choice. I think you would be very happy with the informed history and civics that's being taught in so many of these schools. But I do think American K-12 education in many places has flatlined. so that kids that are trapped in a poorer zip code or a failing school are not getting the same opportunities as the bright young people here that are at the University of Chicago. I do think we're adding a whole different issue, and so much of this, Congressman, that we've discussed today is solved at the federal level. K-12 education is a state issue, and we have no desire for the federal government to get involved.
Guess what? I'll tell you, in our comprehensive immigration bill, we require people in the first 10 years to be fluent in English, and we provide programming dollars to get that done. What could be more American than that?
Okay,
so
last
that they
question.
can pass a civics test.
I
What could be
think
more
this will be
American
the
than
last
that?
question.
Hi, thank you both so much for your time. My name is Bella Wexler. I'm currently an undergraduate student in the college here. I'm also a product of the public education system in Arizona, my entire childhood, essentially. And so I also want to just make a point about what you just mentioned, former governor, about the education system in Arizona as being pretty top of the line and improving. I just want to point out that Arizona is home to the last remaining English-only education law in the country. All of the other states that had some form of this law have since gotten rid of it because it is empirically proven to be severely disadvantaging to English language learners, especially people from immigrant backgrounds who are coming to the States trying to learn English without sacrificing their heritage. And that's called Proposition 203, by the way. So I just wanted to ask a question primarily to you, former governor, about political buzzwords and dog whistle politics. So I wanted to just ask if you could quickly define in concrete terms what you mean by security and order at the border, as well as who the Republican Party envisions to be kept out by these terms, especially comparing the reception of white Ukrainian asylum seekers to non-white Ukrainian and Latinx asylum seekers in our country. Thank you.
Sure. So, Bella, I would define enforcement in terms of some order and structure at the border. I think just like if I invite you to come over for dinner, I want you to come in through the front door. I don't think that you should go stay in the garage and come through the back window. We have to have an idea who's coming and going. In Arizona, we have a border in many places like Yuma, where our ag community is, where there's a lot of good folks from Mexico that don't want to live in Arizona. They live in Mexico, and they come over the border every day, and they return every day. And there's some order to it. And like I said, the border doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not looking to seal the border. I'm looking for some security and stability at the border. I'm sure we could define that in law, in policy, but I think that Americans would know when it is at that point, and then we would be able to move forward on so many of these other topics. And what we want to do is reform the immigration program. That would allow for legal immigration. And what we want to stop is lawless immigration. And that would be the objective.
I couldn't agree with the governor more. But Governor, we have a problem. Every time we had a partner, we had John McCain. He's not there anymore. We had Jeff Flake. He's not there anymore. We had Paul Ryan. He's not there anymore. The reason I read the excerpts of Ronald Reagan's last speech, there is no Ronald Reagan in the Republican Party. There is nobody to sit down and have a conversation about comprehensive immigration reform so that we can do the things you want to do and do the things I want to do and prioritize. We can secure the border, and we can have a humane system of immigration that strengthens our economy. Every economist has stated so, that immigration to the United States is what the strength is. Was Ronald Reagan wrong? He said that that's what makes America great, that we bring the strength of so many countries to this country, the United States of America. And lastly, I want you to know that I'm happy you have the civics test. I helped 50,000 people become American citizens of the United States. I had them enroll in English classes. I have them enroll in civics classes. They successfully swore allegiance to the United States of America. I'd like to see more of that.
Okay.
And that's the America,
Let's stop.
I believe.
We're going to ask one more question, and I'm going to wrap it up.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Lei. I'm a first year at the college studying public policy and data science. I'm from California, so I have a pretty big background in specifically learning about the history behind the US-Mexico border. I've done a lot of research on it, and I've actually worked with DACA and nonprofits in both California and Illinois thinking about all of this and getting people the help that they need, specifically public services, because they're already here. So my question is, thinking historically, especially when we're thinking about the Bracero program and how people were quite literally promised a future in the United States and then stayed and had opportunities in California as farmers, as other people, that essential labor that we have always wanted from Mexicans in the United States. What can we do to actually make we don't want history to repeat itself, and we want systemic change. So even after securing the border, what happens after that? How are we going to change our relationship with Mexico so that the NAFTA agreement, for example, doesn't continuously put Mexico at a disadvantage and make people want to leave? How are we going to secure that? How are we going to create a political equilibrium in that way?
I'll let you take this first.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say that one of the reasons I voted against the North American Free Trade Agreement was precisely what you're talking about. Americans lost jobs. They were sent to Mexico. The refrigerator and the air conditioner still cost more. But Americans lost their jobs, and there was no security for them. And I'm happy you bring it up, because our history is soiled because of our relationship, especially with Mexico. Between 1929 and 1939, the beginning of the Depression and 10 years later, 2 million Mexican and Mexican Americans were deported back. Yes, 60% of them were citizens of the United States of America. Operation Wetback, 1954. Eisenhower becomes president of the United States as a tourniquet operation. 1.3 million Mexicans deported. Again, hundreds of thousands of them citizens of the United States of America. That is the history of the United States of America. And we should have a new history. A new history. We live in the Western Hemisphere. You know who Americans are? Canadians are Americans. People who live in the United States are Americans. So are Mexicans Americans, Central Americans, South Americans. We are all Americans. When are we going to make a priority of our hemisphere so that we can all work together instead of using immigration and division as a tool to promote our political party and our political victories? I think we need to end that.
Governor Ducey, I'm going to let you have the last word, but I will say that President Trump, Donald Trump, the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party, have actually spoken very highly of Operation Wetback and has talked about resuming that in another term.
I have presented what I think are solutions going forward. I'm not here to talk about the history going backwards. I think there's a lot of people of Hispanic descent in Arizona that would take real issue with some of the things that you said, Congressman, and I think they think quite highly of the United States of America and are thriving in our state. We can talk about things that have happened in the past all day long. I would want to bring solutions to the table. I think I'm providing a solution that can happen here. And I think there is so much that can happen beyond this, not only for our country and its people, but our free enterprise system.
Shall we renew Operation Wetback as Trump
No,
wants to?
I don't believe we should, but I think we have a great guest worker program. I think we have a great guest worker program in Arizona around agriculture that is a model of what can be done. Somebody talked about the HB1 visas, which are some of our most talented folks that love our country, were educated here, and would stay. I think all of these issues can be addressed if we begin with securing the border. I know, Congressman, you politely said several times that we agreed or you agreed with me, but I don't think, at least what I've witnessed in Washington, D.C., I don't believe this can be done comprehensively. I do believe it can be done in a step
We're
by step.
never going to have immigration reform as long as we have a president of the United States that believes that immigrants simply poison the blood
This is
of
left
America.
to the people, okay? This is left to the people, and I believe the people have done this before, and we should secure the.
And let's not repeat.
Okay, I think that was a great place to end it, because I do agree that we have an election coming up, and it's not just a presidential election. There will be House and Senate and state house races, and as you can hear today, immigration is going to be a huge issue, and I think that the people will get to speak, and I think that all of you got to see just the breadth and complexity of this issue. So give our debaters a chance.